Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Tour Pro Talks. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, especially seeing as not yesterday. Yeah, was it yesterday? No, it was Wednesdays. Tour Pro Talks didn't quite go to plan due to technical gremlins, but we are here today. Me, Genevieve White, and my very special guest, Jason Elkins. Hello, Jason.
Jenny, so happy to be here. It's very interesting. We've been chatting for 15 minutes or so. And then when you're like, okay, we're going to start, as soon as I got in my mind that we're getting ready to start, I had to actually fight the resistance to say, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Baseball. I'm happy I didn't. so it's fun to be on this side. I appreciate the opportunity.
I think it would have been hilarious if you did that.
But you're like, hey, we're in the wrong place. So anyway, happy to be here, Jenny. Thanks.
Brilliant. Well, Jason, to all of the audience here today, or if you're watching on replay, just a few words about my special guest today, Jason. I've already had the great pleasure of speaking to Jason. Jason is the host of the Big World Made Small podcast. So back in February, I think it was, we got to chat together. And throughout the whole podcast, I was just struggling, actually, although I was very much enjoying being in the guest seat. I was thinking, gosh, this guy sounds like he's had such an interesting life with so many different things. You've worked with you've been a hot air balloon pilot. Is that the term? A pilot?
Yeah.
You've been an army paratrooper, a fishing guide. Of course, all your extensive work in travel. I just had so many questions. So after the podcast was finished, I got in touch with Jason and I said, look, can we swap seats? I do this Tour Pro Talks LinkedIn Live, and it would be really great if you were my guest. So Jason has kindly agreed to be my guest. We've got loads to talk about today over the next half hour. But first of all, a very warm welcome to the audience. If you're watching today live, do say hello, say where you're watching from. I've also got a question for you audience members. Have you ever considered starting a podcast yourself? Maybe you already do have a travel podcast. Do let us know in the comments. And of course, if you've got any questions for Jason, he would be delighted to ask them. Jason has got loads of experience, having hosted 185 podcasts, you said, wasn't it, Jason?
Yeah, we've got about 185. Some of them have not been published to the world yet, but they've been recorded, uploaded, scheduled, and available for a sneak peek on my website.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, and it really is, I must say, an absolute treasure trove. Jason's website, which I'll share the link to at the end, absolute treasure trove of inspiration. He has spoken to so many amazing travel professionals. I'm sure you'll see some well-known faces there if you go and have a look, or people you just love to learn more about. Anyway, let's get started with the interview today. So, Jason, with all of your incredible life experience and career experience, at what point did you suddenly think, I think I'll start a podcast?
Great question. And I reflect on this quite often. Where was the moment? But honestly, I had worked in adventure tourism, been very involved in a lot of things, had my own balloon ride business, worked for an international outbound tour operator that we specialized in fly fishing and nature type trips around the world. And then I went through a period of time where it was like, well, I'm going to say this, go get a real job, because sometimes those of us in this business hear that from family members. And so I took a little bit of a break, and eventually it was like, no, this is not for me. I'm going to kind of immerse myself back into the, I say adventure travel community. We can define adventure travel many different ways, but I was like, I'm going to get back into it, but I'd kind of let some of my contacts and connections fade. And I thought, I really want to reconnect with some people, maybe find a job in the industry. And I thought, I can spend a lot of time just reaching out to people saying, hey, do you have any work for me? Hey, can I help you with your website? Because I kind of like that stuff. And I thought, well, geez, how many people are going to actually agree to get on a call with me? So honestly, this is my first confession, is that I started this just to get in front of people, decision makers, founders, people that maybe I could connect with and find a job. And I thought, I'll do a podcast, because if I reach out and say, hey, I've got this cool podcast I'm starting up, the chances of them giving me an hour of their time was a lot higher. And I thought maybe I would do this for, I don't know, 5, 10 episodes, and I would just get a job, or I'd get a bunch of clients to do websites. And I did get some clients. It actually was a pretty good strategy. But then over time, I figured out that I actually really like the podcasting a lot more than I like the setting up email automations or website stuff or some of the other digital marketing things. So it's kind of why I started it. And then that has changed completely over the last couple of years.
And do you remember your first ever interview? I'm sure you do. What was it like? What was it like? Yeah, we were talking about that question before we went live, so I've just stolen it.
It's a really good question. I'm not sure I remember the first interview I recorded, because I recorded probably 3 or 4 before I actually kind of got the cojones to actually put them out there. I didn't even know. I mean, I didn't know how to do any of this when I started. I started sending out emails saying, "Hey, would you like to be on my podcast?" I think before I even had the cover art figured out. And so I just recorded a few conversations on Zoom. We literally just showed up on Zoom and I, recorded them. But I remember the first one that I released was with Tom Smith, who at the time was a VP of marketing, I believe, for Intrepid Travel North America. That was the first one I released, which was kind of mind-blowing because I kind of like, wow, I got somebody from Intrepid right off the bat. Isn't this cool? Fascinating conversation. And then actually the second one that I released, and I think might have been the first one I recorded, was Carl Egloff, who owns, I think it's Cumbre Tours. I think that's the name of the company. But he's a mountain climber living in Ecuador. Now I think he's back in Switzerland, and he's just attempted to climb to the top of Everest without oxygen. Kind of a big deal. I guess nobody's done that. Up and back. Don't quote me on the details, but he shared a story with me about standing on the top of Mount Aconcagua in, I think it's Argentina, the tallest mountain in the Americas, I believe. And he guided a blind climber up to the top of the mountain. And he shared this story about the experience of standing on the top of the mountain. And this blind climber that was with him was saying, "Carl, describe it to me. What do you see?" And there's this like emotional moment where he was explaining how they were so connected because Carl was the eyes, but it came down to, it wasn't about what you see, it's about what you feel and how you feel those experiences. And I think that was the episode that just got me like, oh my gosh, I can have conversations like this with people. I can ask any question I want. And yeah, so that was kind of my first few memories, and it's probably what got me hooked.
Yeah, I'm not surprised with conversations and stories like that. It must be absolutely fantastic. And I mean, this is obviously forefront of my mind because of our recent technical problem on Wednesday there. But I mean, has anything ever gone really badly wrong?
No, not really. I'm happy you asked that question, because I'll start with what I think the biggest concern is for people that are listening, thinking about either starting a podcast or joining a podcast, is we overthink things. Yeah, things go wrong, but out of 185 episodes, I've never had any train wrecks. I've never had a guest that I thought, oh my gosh, that was probably not a great fit. It was still an interesting conversation. It might not have, maybe someone could look at it and say, well, I thought this was an adventure travel podcast. Why are you speaking with a guy that wrote a book about turmoil or stories in Haiti or this or that maybe is not adventure travel related. But the point is, everybody has an interesting story. I don't care who you are. And I reach out to people and they say, well, I don't really have much of a story. Yeah, you do. So for me, the key is capturing the story. The technical stuff, whatever, have we been halfway through a conversation and one person loses internet and we got to come back and finish the conversation in a few hours? Yeah. And that just means more work for me on the back end. The listeners don't know it. But you've got an interesting challenge because you're doing live, right? So you've got that pressure. I'm recording. So if someone shows up, I'm afraid to say this, but if someone shows up late, it's not the end of the world. That doesn't mean that if you book a call with me, take your time, but because it's great if you do show up on time. But yeah, it's, I I've had a few people show up and they've got horrible internet, and we spend an hour and a half just trying to get it to where we can record. And then we're like, okay, I guess we'll have to try another day. So there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes.
Okay, but nothing unsurmountable.
No.
My next question is, 185 people, that's a lot of people, although the travel industry is a very big industry. How do you go about finding people?
Yeah. So honestly, one experience I had when I was running Orvis Travel was I'd went to an Adventure Travel Trade Association summit in Namibia, Africa. And it made an impact on me. I met a lot of fascinating people. I mean, pretty much everybody there. I was like, I would love to sit down and have a conversation with this person. That just kind of filed away in the files at the time. But when I decided, I want to get back into the business, I want to reconnect with people, where do those people hang out? I was like, oh, ATTA. So, not everybody's an ATTA. I get that. But if you were looking for a concentration of people, especially, and I'd already decided to name mine the Adventure Travel Podcast, Big World Made Small. So I literally went to the Adventure Travel Trade Association website, and I just started going down the list. I went to all their members, click through to their websites. If they looked interesting, I would, find their email address somewhere. Now a lot of people are like, oh, now I understand how I got on Jason's email list. But anyway, and I would just reach out to them and say, hey, I'm starting this podcast. Now it's now most of the guests on the show have been referred by someone else. Like you've referred a few people to me that I believe have already been recorded. So it's mostly referral, word of mouth. I try and get my guests out there as much as possible so other people see their episode and maybe reach out through my website and say, hey, I saw you had so-and-so on the show. So it's gotten much easier. I spend very little time scraping websites for email addresses at this point. So, but the key, and I want this to be clear, is this is what I do is invitation only. There's a lot of podcasts out there that, you say, hey, I want to be a guest. They're like, great, because they want to bring you on. They're always looking for guests. They bring you on and then they record a conversation of some sort, whatever theme or topic that podcast is. But then they also, the way some podcasters do it, and it's fine, is they've got advertising, they've got affiliate links, they've got sponsors. They need to come up with more content to keep their sponsors happy, to keep growing the audience. They may even do paid ads to grow their audience. It's not necessarily the audience that the guest wants to get in front of, but they've got a big audience. So they need to constantly have new guests. If I don't have any, this may be an interesting conversation. I made the choice quite a while ago. I don't want sponsors. I don't want ads. I don't want to be having a conversation with somebody. We're discussing, their childhood, picking coffee beans in Costa Rica and how that impacted the design of the rooms in their lodge 30 years later. I don't want to drop an ad in the middle of that, or I don't want to interrupt the conversation to talk about testosterone supplements or Bitcoin coaching programs or even travel insurance. And I don't want to have a travel advisor on. And then in the middle of that conversation, I start talking about one of the big, I don't know, Virtuoso or Fora or something like that maybe is in a different network. I just could not figure out how to have an honest, connected conversation and say, hey, hang on a second, let's talk about this or let's talk about that. So because I'm not doing it that way, I'm not just looking for bodies to come in and fill airtime. I'm looking for people I want to spend an hour with having a conversation. And I figure if I enjoy having the conversation, hopefully someone will enjoy listening to it.
Well, I think you get brilliant feedback, not just from your listeners, but also from your interviewees who, everyone I've spoken to who's been on your podcast has always just,
love that.
It was just the best. It was just like talking to a friend in a pub, I've heard. That was a direct quote from one of your interviewees.
I love that. Thank you. It always feels good because I enjoyed the conversation. We usually, when we finish the conversation, I'm like, wow, that was so much fun. I'm a digital nomad. I've been traveling for 4.5 years. I think you'd mentioned that somewhere in the notes. it gets lonely. I think that's the other reason I started the podcast, was I just wanted to talk to people that were kind of in my tribe. And so I have these conversations. I finish them. I'm like, wow, that was super cool. How lucky am I? And then when I post the episode, I feel like, wow, someday my kid, who's 19, I think he's proud of what I'm doing, but someday he's going to go back and look, wow, my dad has hopefully 400 or 500 conversations with fascinating adventure travel people. And nobody can take that away. It's a bunch of other people's legacies combining to help feed my legacy, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and I love what you say about legacy, because in the conversation that we had, and some of the conversations I've listened to you having with other people, it goes much deeper. It's not just about, like their career and what they've done. I mean, you ask big questions. I really came away from the conversation I had with you feeling like, I don't know, I really looked back on my life and thought quite deeply about some of the decisions I'd made and my my philosophy to work and all sorts of things. So you definitely have a knack for getting people to really, I don't know, think about the question of their existence. It's not just a Q&A, a quick Q&A. Anyway, here's a lovely comment from Bethlehem. Greetings from Ethiopia to both of you. I'm so glad to see you back. I've become a great fan of Jason's podcast, and it's truly inspiring to hear so many insightful and meaningful stories shared through it. What a lovely comment.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't agree more.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, he's going all red. He's blushing.
I love that. And thank you so much for the comment. I love that. And Jenny, what you're saying about, it's because, like I said earlier, people think they don't have a story. So early in the conversation, usually, I'll say something like, well, how did you get from where you were to where you are? And so many times, if you listen to a few of the episodes, you'll hear it. Oh, well, when I graduated from college, I'm like, wait a minute. And when we go deeper, when we get back to when you were 12 or maybe younger, that's where the gold is. Mm-hmm. So if you I don't want to say if you let the guest lead the conversation, because they're my guests and it's nice to let guests talk about what they want to talk about. But if you let the guest lead the conversation, you're going to get the same story that they think is boring, that they already said, I don't have much of a story. So if you just let them tell the story they think they have, you're going to get whatever they thought was boring. But when you dig deeper, so like I mentioned picking coffee beans. So I was speaking with Rolando Campos from Chayote Lodge in Costa Rica. And he kind of started to say, he's like, well, when I graduated from college, and we went a little deeper, and it went to when he was young and on the school breaks, the whole family would go out and pick coffee beans and how much he hated it. And it's like, oh, it just kind of sucked and da-da-da-da-da. But then, maybe 20, 30 minutes later in a conversation, he's explaining how he was inspired to design his rooms at his lodge around coffee receiving bins or stations, which I don't know what that looks like, but he did a great job explaining it. And how these threads, these common threads come through that are important. And if someone's not asking you the right questions and helping you figure out those connections, it's really hard to miss that stuff. And then we also, and then there was the time I went to Missouri for a year as an international student. I'm like, we would have missed the coffee bean picking. We would have missed the trip to Missouri, the time in Missouri, which really changed his life and gave him even more, actually gave him appreciation for growing up in Costa Rica and wanting to share it with the world. We would have literally missed all that stuff. And it would have just been, I went to college for hospitality management. I went and worked for a DMC for a while, and then I opened a lodge. And it would have, Rolando, I love you. It would have been boring if we didn't go deeper.
It's just listening to you talk about this. It's making me think you take the whole active listening idea to a whole new level, because you're not just actively listening to what your guests are saying, you're creatively looking for connections and ready to kind of pounce on something they say to be significant. It's just fantastic the way it's such a gift. to have that. And what you bring out, I just remembered as well when you were talking there about something I heard another podcaster say. He was talking about, it sounds a bit morbid maybe, but there's like your CV, your career CV, and then there's like your eulogy CV. And it's like, what they say about you in your eulogy, and that's like your life and your values and the friendships you've made, the relationships you've had, and all the sort of stuff that's not on your. And so many people think in terms of that career CV, but actually what you bring out from people is, even though they're hopefully nowhere near dead, is their eulogy CV, I think. And I think that's really special. Well, and it's all part to do with that legacy thing.
Yeah, you're right, because most of us have a lot of us, even in tourism, have this face that we want to present to the world. It's around our logo, our website, the about section that we write, or our LinkedIn profile, or whatever. There's that, okay, this is the forward facing, this is what I want people to think of me. It's scary to say, hey, why don't you come on and we're going to go deeper, because we're going to dig into stuff that you probably don't even remember. We're going to come out of this with connections that are brand new to you. I've had people come on the show and they're like, yeah, my mom listened to it, and she's like, oh, I'd never heard those. I'd never even heard those stories. I didn't even know that was what was going through your head when you dropped out of college and went to be a ski guide or, a fishing guide or something like that. And you're exposing yourself things that are never going to show up in a LinkedIn profile. And isn't that great? Because isn't that what people want? Because people don't book trips with a LinkedIn profile. They book trips with people. And if you can, most of us have people in our world, especially if we own a business, you need to get your story out there. You need to connect with people, And then they say, well, why don't you take your camera and walk around on your next group trip or whatever, take out your camera, walk around and talk about what you're doing. That's great, but you're never going to talk about picking coffee beans when you're young. You're never going to talk about the National Geographic subscription that your grandfather bought you. You're never going to talk about the slideshow that you watched when you were 9 years old of your neighbors that went to Africa, and that inspired a lifelong passion for travel. You're never going to talk about those things, but those are the things that your audience needs to hear, because those are the things that trigger thoughts. Because as soon as they hear your story, they're going to remember something. They're going, oh my gosh, that I had National Geographics. I used to have maps on the wall when I was 12. Now there's a connection. And when they're ready to take a food tour in Amman, Jordan, or an example, they're like, I know exactly who I'm going to reach out to because I feel a connection with them. It's really hard to do that any other way. I think you do a great job with it on the written end, right? Because that's super important, obviously. Is pulling those stories out. And in our conversation that we had, we talked about that, and you got to get those stories out, not just, taking your resume and running it through ChatGPT and putting it on your about section on your website. You got to do something on your website, but that's not going to, I don't think that's going to do it for a lot of people.
Yeah. And it is extracting the stories that are meaningful, which is, maybe that could be like a side hustle for you, Jason. Apart from your podcast, you could kind of say, look, I'll extract your stories. And people could pay you a lot of money for that, because people might.
Well, here's the thing. Honestly, Jenny, that is my strategy. So I'm really actually happy that you mentioned that, because here's the thing. I've got to the point where I've decided I'm not a podcaster, and I'm not knocking podcasters, but a podcaster typically is, how do I find something that a broad audience wants to listen to and create as much content as I can to get them to listen, to buy my testosterone supplements, to click on the affiliate links in the notes, or to buy me a coffee. That's the typical podcaster model. And no, I would call it a story facilitator, a story guide, a story expedition leader. There's all different types of terms that I could use, because what I believe that I'm going to say this, I believe my superpower is helping people pull out their stories, connect with their stories, because it's really hard to get your audience to connect with your story if you can't connect with your story. So you get somebody that helps you connect with your story, capture it, and then the podcast is just a distribution channel. It's just where we put it. It's all about bringing out the story, hopefully making it as interesting as possible with the right questions and some humor and some fun. And then we just use the podcast to put it somewhere. So now that tour operator can say, hey, Jason and I had a great conversation. I connected with some things that I didn't even remember. I think, you as my potential audience or my audience might enjoy hearing my story about how we started the company and all that stuff. And if you do want to hear that, it's on Spotify, or you can go to Jason's website and review it. So, and, I'm handling this like a professional podcast. When guests come on the show, here's a confession. Maybe some people don't know. On my show, the guests support the show. That's why I don't have sponsors. That's why I don't drop ads in there. So there is some support, whether that's through some sort of paid partnership where they get a bunch of video clips and stuff like that, or maybe we work something out if they've got a huge audience, the email list, something like that. There's different ways we do this, but it is guest supported. So in a sense, yeah, it's not my side hustle. It's kind of actually my primary hustle is I help people share their stories. And we just do it through video and audio. Now, because I'm probably not going to be a good ghostwriter, because there's people like, oh, I can help you share your story. I'll write your story. I'll help you write your story. I would refer them over to you.
Thank you.
But yeah. But it's, and you hear a lot of people say, oh, everybody's always told me I should write a book. Okay. Are you going to? I mean, realistically, most people that are listening to this, or most people that have been on my show, have been told by somebody, probably multiple people, you should write a book someday. And they think, oh yeah, I should write a book someday. Okay, well, that's a big, overwhelming endeavor. So maybe just start with an hour-long conversation with somebody like Jason, and maybe it'll help you crystallize some of those ideas. Maybe you can go back to the transcript later, or you can go listen to the episode later when you're actually ready to sit down and start writing, and maybe it'll re-jog some of the memories that you otherwise would have forgot of. So I don't know, maybe it's good. Maybe I should call it the autobiography starter kit. Come on the podcast, start there, start small, and then work your way up to publishing your book.
Genuinely, well, I feel like I feel we're quite privileged because we've almost like seen this new venture take shape live, watching you kind of think it out in real time. It's been very exciting. I think, I for one will be following that with interest, because I think it sounds like an absolutely brilliant idea. Okay, time is just about running out, so I need to think of a really good question to squeeze into these last few minutes. Okay, this is something that I think is again quite practical about podcasting, but something that people who are interested in maybe trying a podcast for themselves might want to know more about. How time consuming? I mean, obviously we've spoken a lot today about the joy that you take in having these conversations and in meeting these people and making these connections. What about the less glamorous side of things, the sitting at the desk, like trying to edit it and for hours possibly? I mean, does it take hours? Tell us a little bit about that less glamorous side of what you do.
I'm so happy you asked. For me, everything I do around the podcast, I just love it. And I spend I've spent thousands of hours to get it to where it is. For me, that involves a lot around my website and making it, I want a platform. Most podcasts don't have a website. They might get a website through their podcast host where you can get a list of past episodes or whatever, but I'm all in like every guest has their own page with So I've enjoyed it because there's constant challenges. Like, how do I do this? How do I add value? So when my guests come on here, they're like, yes, that is the best podcast. I've been on podcasts before, but I've never had my own landing page. Or I created something over the weekend that's, I call it the Big World Made Small podcast pitch portal. A mouthful. But now some of my guests have access to a tool where they can go in, take their entire episode, all the show notes, everything around it that I've put together for them, and then basically get a list of 10 plus other travel podcasts and everything I know about them, and then use an AI assist generated tool to create a email pitch to the other podcasters. And so it takes all that, it creates this personalized, like, hey, I was just on Jason's podcast, and here's, if you're interested, here's a link to my guest page. I'd love to talk to you about joining your podcast. And here's a few things we can talk about based on what that podcast audience is about and what we had a conversation with the guy. It's friggin' mind blowing to me. Some people will be like, yeah, that sounds pretty simple. Aren't there tools out there? Yeah, there's companies out there you can go pay money to and enter all your own data. But I can. So anyway, my point is I'm saying this because it's exciting to me. So it's like fun and exciting. And so, but the reality is most people put too much time and effort into, getting started. Like, okay, I think I want to have a podcast, but I have to have everything worked out, and I have to have a studio, and I have to have a great microphone, a great camera, They go buy all this stuff, and they think they have a plan, and the average podcaster quits after 3 to 5 episodes.
So I've heard, yeah.
Yeah. So the key is to make it as low barrier as possible. You don't need a website to start. You don't need a fancy microphone. You can do it on Zoom. So just get started. And then when you get comfortable with Zoom and a cheap microphone, and you're like, okay, I kind of have my head around this, then you're still excited, then start making the investments one thing at a time. It doesn't have to be that hard. I don't edit. Really, very, very little editing. I'll edit to create a clip, or if we're doing a package that involves a lot of clips, yeah. But generally, we just have a conversation. I don't want to chop it up. That's their life story, So
yeah. Well, I think that's incredibly heartening to hear, because you just make it sound very achievable. And the editing thing is something that I know. Well, certainly I have, but I know other people who've been thinking about starting podcasts. It's something that always.
Well, I think the key is you got to like people.
Yeah.
There are a lot of solo podcasts. There's a lot of travel solo podcasts, and that's great. But the key is you got to like people, because that's what makes it successful. If you're just like, I have to do a podcast because my marketing team said we need a podcast, and they want me to host it, and it's like pulling teeth to get through every episode, and you've got a list of questions, you just want to get through the questions as quickly as possible, you're going to make it to episode 5 before you quit. I don't know.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah. I think, but obviously, Jason, you've got it. What would you say is we've spoken a little bit about how it might go wrong, if you don't like people, or if you invest in all the equipment and then feel blocked. What is the secret to just keeping on going, to persevering, even if maybe you feel like, you're not getting a wide audience, or, you just, maybe you feel like you're not seeing much return.
Do it for yourself.
Yeah.
In the beginning, literally do it for yourself. You're like, would I want to have these conversations if nobody's listening? Fortunately for me, when I started this, I just literally wanted to have the conversations. Here's another confession. I didn't care about my audience at the beginning. It was like, I'm not worried. If nobody listens, I still got an hour to have a conversation with Tom from Intrepid, or with Carl the mountain climber, or with Daniel from Columbia Eco Travel, or I had all these conversations. Literally, it kind of doesn't matter if nobody's listening. I know it matters to the guests. I get that. I'm not saying I don't care, but it was just, I would want to have these conversations anyway. So it made sense. So if you're like, I would like to do this, even if nobody listens, then it'll make it a lot easier. Because when you start and you feel like, oh, I put in all this time and effort, and then you see the download numbers, you're like, wow, 15 people listened to this in the last 90 days. That was at the beginning. I'm not saying those are my numbers. My numbers are much better. We've got almost 20,000 downloads. We're getting, 300 or 400 downloads a week. That's spread over all the episodes. Obviously more downloads with the more recent ones. But in the beginning, it was just like, I just want to do this, so I'm going to enjoy it. So do it if you enjoy it. And the other thing I really want to share before we wrap up, and I know we're running over on time, is I recognize that when you invited me to come here, I had all these thoughts. Somebody who's done 185 episodes was like, oh crap, what am I going to say? I hope I don't sound stupid. I hope I say something brilliant. I hope she doesn't ask me this, or I hope she asks me that. And it was a huge eye opener. So thank you for the gift of that. And I realized, oh geez, I bet every single one of my guests feel the same way. Now you're doing a live, so there's a little more pressure with the live, but I bet every one of my guests feels the same way. And then I realize, okay, the number one fear most people have is public speaking, which is very closely tied to being on a podcast, especially if it's a video podcast. And I realized, oh, I've put together a business around that relies on people to overcome the most common fear that people have. I didn't think about that when I started this. So I want to say, imagine you have a group of people, you're on a trip, you're staying at a lodge somewhere, you're sitting down at the dinner table, and the questions start. Hey, Jason, how did you get in this? What were you doing before this? What was it like growing up in northern Wyoming or whatever? If you've ever had a conversation like that, my question to you is, did you prepare for it? Do you feel like you know it's going to come again? Do you feel like you need to prepare for that conversation again? Do you worry about sounding dumb? Do you worry about any of that stuff? Well, if you can go on my podcast or another podcast or do your own podcast and keep that in mind and say, you know what, this is literally just a story. I know my story. I might not be able to think of what I want to say, but if I've got a good host, they're going to remind me of things. And it's like, if you can sit with a group of guests and have a conversation and answer those questions you've heard 1,000 times, then I'd say, if you want to consider doing a podcast, try really hard not to think about what you're going to say. Tell my guests, just show up. If you can get in front of a computer with internet, and that's pretty much all you really need to do ahead of time. We'll take care of the rest when you get there.
Yeah, brilliant advice. Yeah, brilliant advice for anyone who would like to go on a podcast, but it just feels a wee bit nervous.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. You were feeling the fears today, especially when I mentioned thumb screws in a comment earlier. But
look, we got through this because you are so good at just making me feel casual. We chatted for 10 minutes or so before we started this, and I just feel very comfortable with you. And it's not because you were on my podcast before. It's just the nature of you are like most people that do these live events or podcasts. Most of them are honestly pretty friendly, pretty outgoing, pretty good questioners. I think I'm going to get rid of the word interview. I'm working on figuring out how do I extract that, because interview sounds intimidating.
It does. It does. Immediately makes you think of job interview, doesn't it? And just and that very one-way street with the questions all coming at you.
Or what kind of interviews? When you think of what have we seen on TV growing up, and there's this, like, the person asking the questions most of the time on the news is trying to trip up the guest.
Yeah.
Trying to put them in an awkward spot, trying to get them to cry, trying to get them to admit to wrongdoing. And so, like, the word interview is like, holy crap, that sounds scary for most people. I'm super outgoing, obviously. But if I get a little bit nervous about the idea of an interview, it's like, oh, geez, yeah, okay. Most people are probably going to. So I'm going to scrap that and call it, I don't know,
conversation.
Lodge dining room conversation. It's a get to know. It's not even meet and greet. It's just kind of a like, hey, let's just get together and I want to hear your story, because we all have stories, especially if you work in this business. Like, I could not do a finance podcast. Oh my gosh, that would be miserable for me. Or investing or real estate. I worked in real estate for a while, which is what prompted me to want to get back into tourism. We're all tour people. I think the fact that I have so much time and interest in tourism, I think helps as well. Because it's like you're talking to someone that's has similar experiences. We all have similar experiences. Everybody listening to this, everybody on my show, everybody listens to my show. That's how we connect, through similar experiences. It's that's why people read, right? I remember someone said, you probably know who it was. Someone said, we read so we know we're not alone in the world. That's something I remember from high school. So I might've got it wrong.
Oh yeah, no, I know that quote, but yeah, I've forgotten who said it. I want to say Maya Angelou, but I don't know if that's right.
I don't know, but it's true. We read stories and it's like, oh, I'm not alone in the world, because we connect that way. We connect through shared stories, similarities, shared experiences, and which is what I friggin' love about doing the podcast, because I every single time feel like, oh, I'm not alone in the world, and I like that, and I like to think that the people that listen to the show and comment on the show, I hope that's what they're getting out of it. because I'm serious. Big World Made Small is to bring people together. Maybe that I thought that was obvious when I named it, but it is. It's to connect us with people from around the world, make it smaller. I created the show, came up with the name when I was in Asia on my first trip to Asia, which always seems so far away. And then when you get there, you're like, yeah, the plane flight's a long ways away, but you know what? People are people. You know, there's people walking around in burqas and hijabs and all this stuff, but you know what? They're holding their kids' hands, they're holding their husband's hands. The kids are climbing all over. It's like we're all friggin' people, and we can connect. I can connect with people in Malaysia or Indonesia or whatever. So what's to stop people from connecting? It's just the lack of shared stories. So that's my passion.
And I think that's an absolutely wonderful note to end on. And yeah, I have enjoyed this conversation so much, Jason. I have got so much to take away and think about from it as well, and things to apply to my own work as well, and to my own future conversations with my own guests here on LinkedIn Live. So thank you for being such an inspiration and for taking the time to talk with me today. We really appreciate
Thank you, Jenny. You are really, you're a connector. So we were just talking about connection, and that's what got me so excited about coming on here, because I was like, yep, she's in the tribe. She's got the same passions that I do. And so thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. And I know we went a little over on time. I hope that's okay. I hope the LinkedIn police aren't going to block your account or something.
Oh gosh, not again, not again. No, I'm sure it will be fine. But thank you to our audience. If you're watching on replay, as I suspect many of you will be due to the rescheduling, please do leave a comment. Please do check out Jason's website as well. I'll put a link to that in the comments. And thank you again, everybody. See you next week for another Tour Pro Talks, which I'll be promoting later on today. So if you want to find out who's going to be interviewed next week, it's going to be a very exciting one, another very exciting one, then do keep your eyes peeled. But for now, thanks very much, everybody. Thank you, Jason. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jenny. Bye.